Everybody, Scott Burnside here for the maiden launch of the Suitcase and the Scribe. My good friend Mike McKenna. I got to tell you, Mike. As soon as the camera came on, I was like, "Oh my gosh!" I feel like I'm not prepared for this. You look great. You're in your home closet studio, surrounded by. Is that every jersey you? No, because I don't think you got jerseys from all your teams. But what do you got there in your background?
It's close. All the jerseys that I was able to procure after my career, only a few were given to me by teams. A lot of them I've traded for. I've had to go back and purchase. I've gotten to be friends with some of the people that collect, and they've helped me out. So it is awesome to have this room with basically every mask. I do have every mask that I wore, which is amazing. And then most of my jerseys and some awards and pictures. And it's just a big tribute to a pretty lackluster career, but it's nice because when people come to visit the house and they decide to stay in the guest room, hey, if you want to hang your clothes, you're going to have to deal with everything that's in here. So this is my me room. I didn't want it to permeate throughout the house. I really would like to keep that focused on the family. And your living room looks beautiful. I love the artwork and the fireplace in the background. So don't sell yourself short here, Scott. This is an exciting endeavor, man. I'm pumped, man. This would be so much fun to do this in perpetuity,
Well, listen, I got your memo. I had the shirt and tie and the jacket ready to go, but I got your memo that here at the Suitcase and the Scribe, we are going relaxed dress code. Got the Lululemon shorts on. You can't see them, thank goodness. But no, we're going casual here. And I noticed you're sporting the St. Louis Cardinals cap, the hometown Cards after it today as we're taping in the wild card game. But I want to we talked about your jerseys and the mask. For people who don't know, and you should know, Mike McKenna, 4 years, St. Lawrence University. Mike, I have to tell you, I got a text from a number of NHL executives who said, I'm going to be in over my head, smarts-wise, with a St. Lawrence guy. Your first pro game, 2005, 2006, Las Vegas Wranglers in the ECHL. Your career ended up, that 2018-19 season was pretty wacky, but Belleville, Ottawa, Philly, Lehigh Valley Phantoms. What an extraordinary trip for you, Mike. And I'm wondering, when you think of the journey, what do you think of? Like, when you think of that, of the path that you traveled, what do you think of now that you've stepped away from it in terms of the playing part of it for a couple of years now?
It's just surreal. And by the way, I don't know which people in management you were speaking with. I think they're letting the St. Lawrence reputation precede what I can actually do in the intelligence department, but it's duly noted and appreciated. I just think of my career, and sometimes, you get these flashbacks with social media where you see memories, whether it's Facebook or different mediums, and I'll see things that came up from 8-10 years ago, when I was playing in maybe Binghamton or Peoria. And at that point in my career, I'm thinking, like, I'm a grizzled veteran, 7-8 years in. And I ended up playing 14 years of professional hockey and getting the opportunity to wear 9 sweaters in the NHL and not play a lot for them, but I wore them, and earned those chances. And I just sometimes marvel at how, I don't think things really lined up for me a lot of times. I think I had to make my opportunities. I had to play well enough at the minor league level to get those call-ups. And I'm proud of that. I'm really proud of how I was able to adapt my game over the years, to learn new things, to listen to the people that surrounded me, and frankly, to keep getting jobs based on the fact that teams thought I'd be good in a locker room and I could mentor people. That meant a lot to me. And, as a goaltender, you've got to be a mentor. You've got to be a good teammate to your goalie partner. You've got to help each other out. And that was really a core tenet of what I did. But it was just such an amazing journey. And the people I met along the way, like Scott, you and I met in Dallas when I was there, 13th year of my pro career. And, Scott, like I had read your work for a number of years. Obviously you've written for some major publications and an incredibly accomplished career on your own right. And we get the chance to sit down and, people hadn't really told my story. A lot of it had just been, okay, here's Mike. He's being called up. Maybe he'll play. That's about the end of it. And, I was really flattered when, you wrote a piece on me that was basically the story of my career in a lot of ways. And I just thought, wow, somebody actually cares and somebody gets it for once. That it's so easy to look at a guy like me that was really a number 3 goaltender and think like, oh, he's just playing for the love of the game. He's just kicking around. And no, man, I was driven and I wanted more every year. It just didn't fall that way. And I was always thankful for that. And now, like, Scott, like, can you imagine, here we are, we've got the opportunity to work together and do this podcast and tell all these stories from all of our experiences. It's so cool.
Yeah. I remember the night we were in San Jose, Kari Lettinen gets hurt. Ben Bishop had been hurt earlier, and the season was not going the way the Dallas Stars had hoped. But you got the call in the middle of the game in San Jose, came in, played outstanding. Stars got a win against the Sharks. It was a ton of fun. And, I'm really curious, Mike, because the last couple of years you spent, you've transitioned so wonderfully. It sounds like Eddie Haskell here, but you've transitioned so nicely, given your experience to various platforms. But you spent a couple of years providing color and analysis for the Golden Knights in Vegas. And I wonder, when you think of that experience and maybe, the kinds of lessons you've learned in, how you view the game, how you communicate what you're seeing as a longtime player. And I always think the goaltenders have a perspective on the game that is so different than skaters and coaches or GMs for that matter. But I wonder, when you think back of, in the last couple of years and watching so closely, have you learned lessons? Have you learned stuff about yourself, about the game, how you view it, how you communicate it?
Oh, completely. Goaltenders view, you have this really unique lens where everything is in front of you. And it's very different from the players. Now, during the summertime, I played forward. I love to go score goals in the summer, and I love to be able to skate with my dad. My dad's 71 and we still play hockey together. It's amazing. It's the best. And I hope that, my daughters and I have that chance someday. But I do think that gave me some more insight into how the overall game is played. But it didn't really sink in until I had to analyze that in real time. And I had to put myself in the shoes or in the skates of the players, of the defensemen, of the forwards. I had to learn from an analyst standpoint what it's like to drive the F1 forward, to push the D back and give space to the F2 and F3 coming, and how to eloquently describe that on air and make it simple enough for people to understand without missing details. That was important to me. I didn't want to just be a goaltender that described things. Is it my wheelhouse? Absolutely. I've got a piece up on DFO right now relating to a great save that Marc-Andre Fleury made the other night in preseason. It's my honey hole. I could do goalie all day long. But what I really have enjoyed doing, Scott, is taking things outside of what I'm really good at and making myself good at that, and pushing myself to find that. And it's not just players. Like, you really, when you're doing analyst work, you have to crowdsource. You have to talk to people. You have to learn a new skill set other than just walking in a singular locker room. And you have to learn what the general managers are thinking. Yeah. You have to put yourself in the coach's shoes. And so all of those things came together, I think, to making me, if I distill it down to one thing, it makes me watch hockey differently than I used to. Yeah. A goalie's eye used to be, I watched the goalies the whole time. Yeah. And you know what? I still get to do that when I watch my old college team, my alma mater, St. Lawrence University. I'm just watching the goalies there for the most part. But when I watch NHL hockey, I'm watching everything now and soaking it in and trying to make sure that I understand the full breadth of the game, not the game within the game in the crease. And Scott, I'll flip that around to you. You've done this. You've been involved in media for so long and writing. And I would have to imagine, I question you this, how has it evolved for you from the time you started as a writer, as a young media starlet in the hockey world, to what you do now today?
Yeah, well, it has. I mean, it's changed pretty dramatically. I'm an ink stained wretch, right? I started in the business as a newspaper guy. I was a news guy for a long time, and even when I transitioned from news to covering sports, which was almost exclusively hockey. I did some football and along the way and different things, but mostly it's been hockey. And it has changed dramatically in terms of sort of the skill set that you need to bring to it. I mean, there was no such thing as a podcast when I started. There was, I went to work with a notepad and a pen. I don't even know if I had a tape recorder because of that, when I started, I mean, tape recorders were like this big, right? I mean,
you had to haul around the cassette tapes with you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things in terms of, sharing stories and communicating, what is going on in the game, or my take, or what people have said or shared. That changed the ability to do to communicate on different levels. I spent a long time, I was 13 years at ESPN/ESPN.com, not too much hockey, but a fair amount of video, lots of podcasts, but also the immediacy of turning things around. And I think there's a certain, you have to be so careful now, because the rush to be first, or who's getting a tweet out, and, is it, it's easy to say, oh, it's better to be right than to be first, but there is a lot of pressure on some levels to be first, and to be breaking stories, and to be on the front curve of that. So, that has changed a lot over time as well. And, I grew up in a time when I wrote a story for the paper, and you waited to see what all the other newspapers had, right? And you had to wait until you physically had one in your hand. I've got a son who's just turned 19. I don't know if I've ever seen him hold a newspaper in his hand. Like, I don't know if he's ever had that experience. So yeah. That's a big change.
It's interesting. I would still grab the daily crossword when I was playing. I love to do a crossword every day when I was active, and I still do nowadays. It kind of warms my brain up, but there's just something about that tactile feel of a newspaper, isn't there? And it's missing. Like you said, like your son doesn't have that opportunity anymore.
Yeah, no, that's good. All right. It's been fun. All right. Let's talk some NHL hockey.
I think it's time for that.
I always love this part of the season. As you and I are talking, Mike, we're less than a week away from the start of the 21-22 season. Got Olympics in the mix. We've got hopefully a return to normalcy. Hopefully, COVID-19, we're not clear of it, but hopefully this season will represent something close to normal. And
we're managing it now, I would say.
That's it. And there's been tons of news as we even approach the first game. And I think the biggest story in hockey, and it may turn out to be a story that continues to be, or to resonate throughout the season and beyond, perhaps, is Robin Lehner, a guy very well, and of course, in Vegas, and his social media, the word that I'm looking for, but sharing on social media, some very serious concerns about a whole range of things. And I wonder, from the moment you saw those tweets going out, what went through your mind, and what was your reaction to what Robin Lehner had to say to the hockey world?
Well, if the first thing that catches your eye is just, this is so uncommon within the Vegas Golden Knights. Okay. Beyond the aspect of what Robin was saying, it was like, he's really putting himself out there. He didn't tweet all last season until playoffs. The whole team didn't tweet last year at all. And now all of a sudden the shackles are off. He's saying what he wants to. So to me, this is truly a personal decision that, hey, whatever the team has said for us about social media, I don't care. This is important enough, and I need to say this. Yeah. And the guts it takes to do that is massive. And this kind of started last year during the bubble, or during the season, when it came down to the vaccination status, and Robin put it out there that, hey, like, we think that if we all get vaccinated, we're going to get more privileges. We can do more things. And that was the start of it. And Robin sat on stage for 12 minutes, pouring his heart out in one of the bravest things I've seen a player do, to sit up there and truly speak about what he felt, no matter what anybody else decided about it. And I can tell you that this ruffled people in the hockey world when he did that, to an extent that I hadn't seen. I listened and heard people within hockey mock what he was doing. And to me, it made me feel sick, because this is a person standing up for what he thought was right. Yep. And, that's kind of where this continues to. The hard part to this is that, Robin has really put some things out there. I mean, essentially calling upon another team's head coach to be fired, in some ways blackmailing the NHL to get this done. I'm going to release something every day unless you fix this. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of blackmail. And, that didn't resonate well within hockey circles and for some people. But then you've also got those who've been wronged by things within the game that are going, yeah, go get them, Robin. It's about time somebody stood up for this. It's about time somebody had the guts to do this. And I mean, he even mentioned it. Wait till the NHL cancels me for this, and that hasn't happened. He has a lot of leverage here, and he's using it. He's using that bully pulpit. And the real question for me is, who comes along with him? Who's willing to jump on this bandwagon and make it happen? Because sometimes all you need to do is you get a crack in a levee and things start to go. Yeah. There's a lot going on there, but I think his crusade, and crusade's not the right word. I just think what he's doing is virtuous. I think he's standing up for what he believes, but I think he's got to be careful with it because the messaging wasn't perfect when it came out. It was passionate and it has created some change and it's rattled some cages. But I think moving forward, like he said, hey, I'm happy with the progress, but it's going to be behind closed doors from now on.
Yeah. Well, and that, I think you're absolutely right. And I talked to people who are connected with the NHLPA, and they were, that they were involved in the process as well. And certainly the fact that already the NHLPA and the NHL have met and, sort of to take steps forward to address what Robin was talking about during the series of social media tweets. And there is, I agree. I think there's there has to be some caution, because if you're talking about, and let's talk about whether it's the use of opioids or sleep aids or whatever it is, which has for years and years been a real problem. You would know better certainly than I am, but
it's been documented, really. Yeah. That's a pretty open secret that, hey, like teams weren't, and in general, players were getting prescribed things or given things that may not have jived with proper medical ways about going. That's kind of already out there.
Right. And I guess, since I think it was after the lockout in 2012, I mean, it's enshrined in the CBA now that,
yes,
the control of those kinds of substances and the league and the PA and their doctors trying in lockstep, at least in theory, to monitor the use of that. Now, no one is naive enough to think that if you are seeking, whether it's self-medicating with pain or sleep and all those issues, which are real and are critical issues for players, you can find them. There's no doubt. But the league and the players, like, it's not like they aren't keeping track. They are. And so yeah. I do think it's important. I think it's important. And my guess is in these private conversations now, they're going to look at specifics. What really, if you were told this, can you share, if there are things that are falling through the cracks, let's address them, but they'll need to get specific answers and to be able to verify them. I guess, well, let me ask it this way. My sense is there's still a lot of cynicism about the NHL and maybe the NHLPA by extension about how you react to something like this, because it's brand new, right? This is a player playing. He's an important player on one of the best teams in the NHL. And he has put himself out there to have these conversations. I think there's cynicism that, all the NHL wants to do is shut Robin Lehner up. I would like to think that what the NHL and the PA hope to do is to find out what he's really talking about. And if there are issues that have fallen through the cracks or been ignored, that they address them. What's your sense of moving forward?
I think a lot of this comes down to what the PA does and how they communicate with people. And, if these problems and issues have been brought up in private to the PA and the PA hasn't moved on it, they haven't gotten any traction, the NHL hasn't truly been aware of what's going on, then everything Robin's saying makes a lot of waves for a reason. And I think there's across the board, a lot of players aren't happy with the PA, for one reason or another, whether it's escrow, whether it's anything. It's a hard job too. Like, let's be honest, like the PA has a lot of conflicting voices trying to pull them in different directions. In some ways, it's a bit of a bloated organization. There's a lot of people that are, in the pipeline and they're ancillary folks trying to do things for the players. And sometimes that voice gets muddied. And, I think the PA is going to have to do a better job of crowdsourcing these opinions and making them happen on purpose. And and they need leadership to do that. Like, look at the Eichel situation that Robin is so passionately spoken about. In the CBA, it says that the team has the ultimate say when it comes to medical care for the player. First one, that's on the team. They take the first opinion. The second opinion, a player can go get it. If it's contrary to the team, they go to a third-party arbitrary or third-party opinion. But ultimately, the team physician makes the decision. They just take into account the second and third. So basically, second and third opinions don't matter. That's what it comes down to. Yeah. Well, whose fault is that? It's in the CBA. The players signed it.
Yes.
How does the NHLPA and the players, because they're lockstep, the PA works for the players. That's what always bugs me. The players can tell the PA what to do, and if they're not happy, you get rid of people. The players signed on the dotted line for that. They decided, okay,
yeah,
we're good with this. And now it's a problem. So when the dollars and cents are all that matters to people, they forget about the important things. The fact that when you're done playing hockey at 35 or 40 years old, you're still going to live until you're 80 or 90, hopefully.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to deal with medical decisions that have been foisted upon you by your employer because you agreed to it.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's a lack of leadership from within and from the top.
Well, and that, I mean, we could go down the rabbit hole on the whole, the Players Association, but your point is, it's good. It's easy to say, well, what is, the PA allowed this to happen? Or like, I go back even to, the fact that after, leading up to the Olympics in 2018, well, it wasn't enshrined in the CBA that the NHL was going to take part, even though it's a motherhood issue for a lot of players.
That's right.
That's why we're going back to Beijing in 2022, all things being equal. It's because it's now enshrined in the CBA. It wasn't before. Well, again, is that a failing of leadership at the PA, or is that a failing of the membership who gets the document and did no one put their hand up and say, well, wait a minute, what about the Olympics here? Or, what happened was that they allowed the NHL to try and leverage that failure for opening the CBA earlier, and it became a bargaining chip that NHL probably didn't expect that they would have. So I guess again, you've been in those meetings and you understand the dynamic within the dressing room, but it is at some point the buck stops with the players because it's their union.
That's right. And it's up to them. And now listen, my negotiation experience admittedly has been American League level.
Sure.
And I've done CBAs. I've sat face to face with owners, with GMs, with very important people with teams. And you learn very quickly what negotiations are about. They're really about money mostly.
Yeah.
But you also have to understand that there's all these ancillary topics that you can get movement on. I can guarantee if the players put their foot down and said, we're not doing this until we fix medical, that would change, because it doesn't matter as much as the revenue sharing. Yeah. Even if Jack Eichel is a $50 million asset for the Sabres, that's something that the players could still push on. And who knows, maybe they pushed hard, but I just don't think that players read enough. I don't think they read the CBA. I don't think they're actively involved enough in the negotiations. We try to round up the herd, and you couldn't get anybody to even show up or listen to these meetings. And again, that's at the American League, but I know it's at the NHL too. The only people that are allowed are people that have problems or complaints, but it's only their cause. They just don't have the necessary interest in the whole picture. It's just, can we get rid of escrow? Well, maybe toss your health in there, toss the off ice, toss all those things. So, there's a lot going on there, Scott. And I think if anything, that what Robin's done is going to help the dialogue, and that's what we can hope for. And hopefully, his cause of mental health is it helps that as well, because the players do need that, and people don't understand how difficult it is on them. And, it's a topic that's not going to go away. And another topic that won't go away happens to be injuries to start a season, Scott. And it's every year, man. Like these teams commit to it and you're thinking, man, we're good on paper. We're going to crush them. And then all of a sudden, oh no, Crosby's out. Malkin's out. Is Gensel going to be back? I don't know. Is Aston Reese going to be okay? Like, there are so many question marks to a season when people get hurt. And Scott, I'm wondering from your standpoint, what teams are you looking at thinking there's some question marks here? Can they recover from the injuries that they have presented to them at the start of the season?
Yeah, no, and I mean, you touched on it, Mike. For me, I think the Pittsburgh Penguins are the obvious ones, but with all due respect to Jeff Carter, I love the pickup of Jeff Carter by the Penguins at the trade deadline last year. Great career and a really important part of that Penguins team. I frankly should beat the Islanders in the first round if they got any kind of goaltending, but I digress. But now he's their number one center. I'm not sure that was the plan for Ron Hextall.
No, he was meant to be a third line winger, potentially center if necessary.
Yeah, exactly. But it doesn't start there. And I guess, this is the interesting part is how teams, it's different for some teams. If you get off to a slow start, if you get off to a slow start in Tampa, or in Vegas, probably doesn't matter. Colorado probably doesn't matter as much. For me, the Metro is a complete logjam. Have very little sense of the whole, if there are there 3 teams that go to the playoffs? Maybe there are 4. I can't imagine 5. But anyway, if you get off to a slow start in the Metro, that can scuttle your season. And I think that's the issue for Pittsburgh. Washington, maybe without Nicholas Backstrom with an ongoing hip injury, one of my favorite players in the NHL, playing in the shadow of Alex Ovechkin all those years. I don't think people get how critical Nicholas Backstrom is to all of what goes on in Washington. And I think it's interesting that both those teams have significant injuries potentially moving into the regular season. We know Malkin and Crosby won't be there to start. You mentioned Jake Gensel, COVID-19 issues. Hopefully he'll be back. I'm curious, is there a team that, where you look at the injuries and you think, these first few weeks could dictate the entire season for this team, whether it's Pittsburgh or Washington. And I think of those 2 teams because I wonder, it hasn't been great for them the last couple of playoff years. Are we seeing a window closing on the 2, sort of standard bears in terms of franchise success coming out of the 04-05 lockout?
Well, I think so. I really look at, Pittsburgh, man, like you said, is the tough one for me, missing those 2 big superstars. And Washington, Backstrom. I'm also worried about Samsonov there. He's hurt again.
Yeah.
And you start to wonder on a career arc for a goaltender, can he get to that high, lofty status that's expected of him? Because he hasn't really done it yet. There's been glimmers of it, and then he's hurt or he's out or that it regresses. There's question marks in goal for Washington. Vanacek's, he's an NHL goalie. He's proven that. Can he take the next step? They're not expecting him to supplant Samsonov. They need him. So I worry there. And I think across the league, teams are in a tougher spot in some ways. There's a lot of day-to-day at the start of the season.
Yeah.
I do look at Montreal, who's a team that I really like.
Yeah.
I really like them. I love how they played last year. I think they finally have a true identity that even without Philip Danault, you still have people like Anderson and Gallagher really leading the way for them in that young mix of Caulfield and Suzuki. But what are they going to be like without Weber? What are they going to be like without having that trigger man and Hoffman at the start of the season? And is Carey Price going to be ready or not? Nobody knows what's going on with Carey Price. I've tried as hard as I can to find out, and it doesn't happen. His knee, he had surgery on his knee. That was meniscus in July. And that's not a minor surgery for a goaltender. Mm-hmm. There's still question marks if he's ready to play from that. Now he's sick. Now they have good goaltending in Jake Allen.
Yeah.
But they picked up Samuel Montembeault off of waivers.
Yeah.
That tells me that something's going on with Price more than what we think. It's not just an insurance for half a day. Like you're looking to pick somebody off waivers for a month. That's how it works. Yeah. It's an insurance policy.
Were you surprised? And maybe it was all much ado about nothing. Maybe Seattle was never going to take a run at Carey Price, given the contract and given the fact that it was clear he was going to need the knee procedure. Maybe it was just going to be too much for Ron Francis to take a bite on. But my sense of it is that spoke to how important Jake Allen was to the Montreal Canadiens in general, but specifically with the uncertainty surrounding Carey Price. And, for a team that goes to a Stanley Cup final for the first time since 1993, and I know the whole COVID, people are dismissive of the North. Boo-hoo. They were full value for getting to the final. But now, I don't know. Are they a playoff team? That Atlantic division for me is so top heavy, and there's so many good teams there. this, again, the start of the season may be so critical for Montreal. What do you make of how they follow up a trip to the Stanley Cup final?
I think you'd hope in the locker room that they're riding that wave still. I don't think they lost enough pieces to lose that good feeling. I think Corey Perry not being there is going to hurt them.
Yeah.
And I think that was a bit of a coup for Tampa Bay to pick him up.
Yeah.
Because I still think Tampa Bay can win 3 straight. There's no doubt in my mind that they are a legit contender for 3 straight. I'm not going to play the roll the dice odds of saying, hey, probability, like they have just as much of a chance to win as they ever have. But Perry played a big role there. They've backfilled nicely, though. They have a really good club there. I mean, Kakaniemi goes away as well, but like just look up and down that lineup. Yoel Armia's there, Gallagher, Perreault, Paquette, like they're pretty deep. But they found some magic last year. Let's not forget that they were a bubble club previously. They weren't necessarily where they wanted to be. They weren't top end. They fell off the map for half the season, and then they came roaring back because they started to play defense again. And I think, Dominic Ducharme's done a nice job of instilling his way of playing into the team, and they finally started to get that. I think he's the key piece to this puzzle, really, is the coaching of it. Do they continue to buy into what he's preaching and play that defensive style that they needed to? That's what carried them. Are they a dynamic team that can score with Caulfield and with Suzuki and with Anderson crushing down the wing? And now you've got Dvorak in the mix. Yeah, they can. But the core of that team is defending. And I think Jake Allen's a huge part of that. He was last year and will continue to be. I just don't know when Carey Price comes back, how that split works any longer, but Ducharme to me he's the linchpin there into how that team progressed throughout the season to get to where they were in the finals.
Yeah. All right. We're going to switch gears here just a little bit. And it sort of goes back to me. We were talking about Robin Lehner and how having a current player speak out and share their thoughts and opinions is a little bit unusual given the dynamic of hockey. We're going to see it here at dailyfaceoff.com, but we're going to see around the NHL a real, I think, a welcome change. I welcome it anyway. A welcome change in terms of we're going to start to hear from officials and one of your guy that very well and people around the NHL have known for years and years, and Tim Peel is part of the team here at dailyfaceoff.com. Both ESPN and TNT, I believe, are going to rely on officials to come in and help them help viewers understand whether it's specific plays or how the game is called, those kinds of things. I love that part of the NFL, and I'm a bit surprised that it's taken this long for the NHL to sort of follow suit in terms of why not have that voice, because it's so critical to the flow of the game and how games, the outcome of the game, frankly. But I can't wait to see how it goes. And I wonder what your view of it is and whether, what you're looking forward to when we start to hear from officials, a voice that has been more or less silenced for forever and ever.
Yeah, dating back to when they took the names off the referees' jerseys.
Right.
I mean, Scott, you and I, we both remember growing up and seeing, Van Massenhoven across a backplate that they could hardly fit on that zebra sweater.
Yes.
And the personalities, Bill McCreary with the big mustache, and then you'd have Kerry Fraser with the perfect hair, and then Paul Stewart would be feisty on the ice, and then the famous, Koharski moment with I'm forgetting in New York and
Schoenfeld
with Shoney in New York. And I think that referees and officials are part of the entertainment aspect of the game, and they should be glorified.
Yeah.
I don't like that they've been in the shadows. I think that it dehumanizes them. It takes away the element of the game that is there. It's present. I think people would buy Wes McCauley jerseys.
I would buy
I think
a Wes
there
McCauley.
would be. I would. Yes. I would gladly wear that. And I'm biased, man. My grandpa was a referee until the day he died. 2 weeks before he died at 76, he was on the ice. He was the oldest referee in USA Hockey's system. And I found out later he somehow magically managed to stay 65 years old for a really long time. But I just think that this is a great thing for the NHL to put them on the stage. And I know that the NHL itself had not wanted referees to be able to speak for a long time.
Yep.
I know that. And for better or worse, that's what the policy was. And do we get to the point where referees go up to the stage after a game and do press conferences? No, I don't expect that to happen. But I do think giving them some leniency to speak and to be human and not be completely muzzled is a good thing. And for us at DFO to have Tim Peel to be able to walk us through what has happened and what the referees are thinking, man, it's huge. Like, it gives fans, it gives people in the game an opportunity to understand the why. And why was this? How could they not have seen that call? And if you listen to Tim speak, if you listen to Don Koharski speak on TFT, if you listen to Dave Jackson speak on ESPN, they're going to tell you exactly why that referee didn't have a good sight line. He wasn't able to get there in time. This happened at the blue line, so he couldn't see it. Or maybe he was a little obscured by it. But I bet you anything, he knows that he made that, and he's going to go to the team and make this blah, 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 blah. This is important stuff, because people bag on referees and officials endlessly when realistically, they are not who determines the game. I played for 14 years. I dressed over 1,000 games, and I could probably on one hand think of the times that a referee truly blew it for an entire game and lost you a game. They call a bad penalty on you. So what? Kill it off.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's a great thing for the NHL to have these former officials in positions, frankly, of power, that they can speak to it, humanize the element, humanize what they're doing, and just give context to what's happening on the ice.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think it's important, but to me, it's part of, a longer equation. And that is, you're going to educate the fan who otherwise might be just railing on social media or whatever it is about the referees. And I think to be able to tell their story and to explain things, again, I go back to the NFL. I love when we get the voice that says, here's why they're going to make this call, or here's why they missed it. I love that part of it. I do think that the NHL still needs to come to grips, though, with how the game is called, and it is a long equation. A couple of years ago, I was at the it's called the Exposure Combine, I think, in Buffalo, and the NHL, I think, has quietly tried to bring more people into the pipeline. It's hard. Mm-hmm. It's a hard job. Oh my God.
Ex-players especially.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Well, you know this from being with your girls and youth hockey. It's a thankless, god-awful job, given how sadly fans and parents often treat people at that young age. And so getting qualified, that pipeline needs to be full of men and women who love the game and want to be in that position. And it's a struggle for the NHL, but also I think there's been a struggle. What is the message from the NHL on how the game is going to be called? And we're going to start this season with a welcome, I think, crackdown on cross-checking. I don't know how many times watching the playoffs last year, absolutely cringing as a player gets drilled from behind 4 or 5. You mentioned Corey Perry. What's his back look like after a playoff game? But these are important things. The sad part is what the NHL consistently does, in my mind, is all they do is take pieces that are already in the rule book, highlight them, and then they will be, that's a focus now. We used to be slash on the wrist or the obstruction, all those things. They're in the rule book. Call the rule book. But I don't know. I feel a bit cynical about this notion that, we're now identify cross-checking, and hopefully they will work so that players stop doing that, because it's dangerous and it's illegal. But I do feel a bit cynical about it.
I just think it's going to be like anything else, that for the first 2 months we see a lot of cross-checking penalties, and you get to playoffs and it goes away.
That's it.
The conundrum here is that no one wants the referees to decide the game. That's the refrain. And so the whistles just get swallowed by playoff time. That's it. We're done. Go do what you want. But then you get people that are so upset because they didn't call anything. And to me, it's like, if you have the rule book, call it and people will adapt. They have to adapt. If you keep sitting in the box until January for cross-checking people, it's not going to fly. You're not going to play. Your coach isn't going to put you on the ice, but they have to remain consistent with it. And I just feel like even in playoffs, like it's so exciting to see 5-on-5 hockey and the level ratchets up and everything. But, if you set the tone and make those calls, you got to adapt again. It's like golf, Scott. Like, you got to play it as it lies. You can't walk up, take the foot wedge out, fluff it up, and get your wedge out and knock that baby right stick high with a bunch of backspin because you gave yourself a better lie. Well, you can't just get better or different referees during a game that are going to call it differently. You have to adapt to what they're doing. And they're humans. They're all different. But that rule book is finite. It's black and white. It's simple to read. And you can't cross-check somebody. You can't interfere with somebody. And if you're trying to improve scoring, that's always what we're talking about. We need more scoring. We need games more exciting. Who gets blamed first? It's the goalies and the equipment size and everything. Like, we've always felt the brunt of that. And you throw that back the other way, and it's like, just call the rule book. You'll get a ton of penalties, or at least if you don't get those penalties, it's going to open up the game and let people shine. We don't want to see Connor McDavid flying through the neutral zone, getting whacked on the wrist or interference. We want to see him unimpeded blow past people and go top dog between his feet off the bar and look like Superman out there. That's what we want. But we don't allow that to happen when it comes playoff time, when it comes deep into the season. I just think it's got to be consistent. Either you want to have low scoring games with no penalties, or you want to have higher scoring games where the rule book's called early to the point that players adapt, and then later on it doesn't need to be there.
Yeah. To me, it's a message that comes from the top, and I just wish that there was a consistent message that what everyone sees and what everyone knows to be true is that the game is different come playoff time. It should be. There's more at stake. You're playing in the same team night after night. But I do feel that it is also self-evident that the game is called differently. And again, I just wish that there was a consistent message from the top on to the bottom where we could see a change to that. So maybe we'll see this change with this, with the cross-checking. Maybe it'll carry on all the way through the season into the playoffs. I look forward to seeing it happen in practice.
Do too.
Yeah.
I don't have much hope for it, honestly.
Yeah, me too. All right.
I'm pessimistic.
We're going to come back and wrap up the first edition of the Suitcase and the Scribe. First, though, DoorDash is the proud sponsor of the Nation Network of podcasts, restaurants, and more delivered right to your door. And I know you were a big fan of DoorDash, Mike, and I'm glad that they're aboard. I'm looking. It's already making me hungry. So
well, we've got that promo code to use, and I think that during the pandemic, we all learned different ways to get food delivered to your house. And thankfully, DoorDash in St. Louis, Missouri, is a pretty expansive list of restaurants. We've got a Thai place down the street and another couple of different favorites that we used it during the pandemic because we weren't going out of the house, and now we found that we're using it now because it's just so easy and it gives us more time. So big DoorDasher fan. And as you said, now we've got some rapid fire. So Scotty, I think I'm going to start off. I'm going to pose you a couple questions here. All right. I've got 3 of them for you.
Okay.
And I just want to take this some different directions.
Okay.
First one, which team or teams do you think are going to surprise this season?
Oh, that's good. Now, you want a positive surprise or a negative surprise?
It's open-ended on purpose.
Open-ended. I think there's a certain amount of cynicism about the Edmonton Oilers. The whole, the Duncan Keith edition, and they've lost for me a lot of the defensive depth that you might have a couple of years ago would have expected that we're going to be important players. Ethan Bear, who's in Carolina now. Adam Larson is in Seattle, I think had evolved into a really underappreciated top 4 shutdown D guy.
Clefbaum's still out there.
Clefbaum's still gone. Injuries, so his place in his return unknown, but it's a long term. Caleb Jones, of course, joining Seth Jones in Chicago. But I talked to a scout not long ago, and he really thinks that this Oiler team is better, or that they will be better this season. And a lot of it has to do with Zach Hyman. I'm going to use this. I'm going to use it repeatedly and pretend that I came up with it. But I did have an executive who said to me, what if Zach Hyman is to Connor McDavid what Chris Kunitz was to Sidney Crosby? And if that's the case, a lot of the questions about who helps Draisaitl and McDavid, who supports them in terms of scoring and production. I think Zach Hyman is a huge part of that. And so I think the Oilers are going to be a surprise. I picked them to go to the Final Four. I picked them to go to a Western Conference Final. So that's one of my surprise teams.
I like that. I think the Rangers are a team I would look for. And I also I wouldn't discount the Dave Tippett factor in Edmonton. I think he has really done a good job coaching that club. He's been successful previously with Phoenix and Dallas. That team's finally bought into it. If they can keep that defensive pressure that they did last season, can they roll that into playoffs? That's my question for them.
Yeah. The thing I like about Dave Tippett is that, and I believe this is his contract year, all other coaches, that could be or would be an issue. And we saw Sheldon Keefe sign an extension in Toronto, really to take that out of the equation, which totally makes sense to me. Dave Tippett can do whatever he wants. He's one of the smartest people. He's an astute businessman. He's in this to win a Stanley Cup. And if it's not about him personally, I just think you're absolutely right. Like, he's a great fit there. There's a lot of pressure on him this year, that whole team, as there should be. There's no way. You should never have been swept by Winnipeg. That's embarrassing. But I do think the Oilers do take a step forward this year. All right, I'm going to give you a name. We'll do a little word association then. Carter Hart.
In major need of a good start to the season.
Yeah. Because
last year was abysmal. It was not anything that he or the team wanted, but they continue to believe in him. They continue to throw all their weight behind him. Yeah. But he's going to have to earn that crease. Martin Jones was a starting goaltender for the last however many years in the NHL. He's won a lot of hockey games. He has had incredibly mixed results as well. He needs to bounce back too. But Carter Hart has to win that net. He's got to come to work every day with a smile on his face, have some fun, and get that joy back. I think it can happen. I think Philly should be improved defensively. And I think that'll help insulate him and give him some confidence. But he's gone through the first bit of adversity really in almost half a lifetime. He has always been on a really good team and been able to perform. So bounce back season needed. He's got to grab that net early and run with it.
Yeah. I'm a little bit biased. I spent some time with Carter a couple of summers ago, and I know you know him from your time in Philadelphia. Yeah. Such a good kid and really smart. And just before we leave that, to me, and it's not just Carter Hart, but to me, I think this is a season after the last two seasons with the COVID and the restrictions. My sense of a young man who was going through a difficult time last season would have been exacerbated by the fact that you don't have the time on the road with your teammates. You can't go and hang out at Claude Giroux's place, or you shouldn't have. You can't go and you can't find solace or comfort in a way that you normally would. And I think, I'll ask you, do you think that this season, assuming we maintain a sort of normal ability to interact, how important is it for a young player, whether it's Carter Hart or Alexis Lafreniere or any other young player that maybe didn't achieve what they wanted to? How important is it to have normal?
It's just such a hard way to break into the league and establish yourself when you don't have the normal creature comforts of being a human being.
Yeah.
It's so tough to do, but some people handle it better than others. Some people didn't affect them whatsoever, and I think that that's really how you compartmentalize things. I do think that is a sign of the mental strength of some players that are able to take these things and just put them away. Sometimes I believe that the hyper-focused hockey people struggle when they don't have resources and outlets outside of hockey. And I think that in a situation like last year, man, I'd have been doing everything I could to find a hobby in my house. I would have been a prolific guitar player. Like I would have read 15,000 books. Like I would have found things to do to take my mind off of hockey, because it's so easy to spiral when things don't go well and when there's expectations and when they're all on your shoulders. And I mean, I love Brian Elliott, but he wasn't pushing Carter Hart at all.
Yeah.
And it was a good fit because good mentor friends. I think Martin Jones, now you've got somebody come in who's been a number one and he's going to push him. So It was a tough year for players, but then again, like some people were fine, it affects everybody differently. Yeah. And so my next question for you revolves around kind of that similar topic. How many games this year are rescheduled due to COVID-19?
I'm going to say 0.
Good.
I think we're on track. I think, not to go down the vaccination rabbit hole, but I think the fact that we're going to start this regular season with really a handful of players who are unvaccinated, I think is critical. And even though, my understanding of Jake Gensel is that was, he was vaccinated, still, he was dealing with some COVID issues. But what I hope we're going to find is that those things, that's reality. That's the reality of COVID-19, but it's not going to lay waste to a team like we saw with Dallas out of the gate last year. We saw with Vancouver, Buffalo. I don't think we're going to see any of that. I think we're going to see, watch me jinx it now, smooth sailing 82 games. So
I agree with you. I hope so, at least.
Yes. All right. I'll ask you final question, a little word association. Vladimir Tarasenko.
Oh, when does that blow up in St. Louis? I mean, here's your star player making $8 million, who's finally healthy again, who should contribute to your team, and he doesn't want to be there. And I know everybody's saying the right thing, but that's a distraction, and that's going to at some point blow up if that's not taken care of. Like, maybe I'll be proven wrong. I don't know. Maybe somebody in the locker room is going to grab him and just say, "Hey, you're either on board here, or you can just leave." I don't know how that's going to play out, because the whole thing's just weird to me. You know, you're already being paid handsomely in a city that you've won a Stanley Cup in. You've been a great player in the league before. I know that there seemed to be an undercurrent there that he wasn't happy with his medical care. Again, here comes medical care into the picture. And that can cause a real rift between a team and a player. But at a certain point, it's like, hey, this is done now. Let's go play hockey and forget this. You know, the spitefulness that seems to come with it, and the vindictiveness of just wanting to be out because of that, sometimes takes people over. And, you know, I don't know how that's going to play. And I think Tarasenko was such a big piece to that team. And I don't know if he is any longer, because in my eyes, I feel like that team had moved on from him, even though they haven't moved him. I think this would be a really interesting year for him, because I don't see him getting back to the level he was. I don't know who's going to take him at $8 million.
I just think it's such a fascinating year for the Blues. You know, they haven't looked great since, winning the Stanley Cup in 2019.
Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, and a lot of pressure, I think, on Craig Berube to start. But I talked to somebody who was saying, I thought Doug Armstrong has done another nice job of, he brings in Pavel Buchnevich from New York, much love there. And I wonder if having Buchnevich there, is that something that, is there a natural bond that forms with Tarasenko? Brandon Saad in the lineup there, 2-time Stanley Cup winner. There's no reason the Blues shouldn't be in the playoffs. But that Central Division really, there's not a lot of margin for error, and the Blues there's a lot on the plate there, and it starts with Tarasenko. So
it does 100%, and I agree with Armstrong. Of course, he's got a brand new contract extension, I believe 5 more years in St. Louis, and well-earned Stanley Cup, and the team's been in the playoffs all but 1 year under his leadership. But I think that the Tarasenko thing's a real distraction, and I don't know where it plays out. Maybe it all gets shoved under the rug. Who knows? But that we've seen this all before. It just festers. Something's got to change there. I got one more for you to end this. This is a fun one. All I want to know is All-Star game in Vegas. Scotty, we're looking at this. We're circling it. We're thinking, you know what? We might be getting the band back together like Jake and Elwood. We might get, some dry white toast and a couple of fried chickens, just like those boys in the Blues Brothers. Where's the first place we're going in Vegas when we meet up for the All-Star game?
Oh, okay. I like your thinking, and I'm already going to be starting to do some research. My favorite dive bar in Vegas closed down. I haven't been there in years. I like there's I like a place called the Oasis, like O and then Aces. I've spent an interesting evening there. But I'm here. You're the Vegas man, Mike. And my bottom line is, where you go, I go.
Well, maybe we'll go do a little tiki bar. I had a friend of mine, one of our folks from the broadcast crew, Chris Jones, gave me the true insider tour of Vegas when I was there. And there's some pretty cool places to head to. And of course, our mutual friend, Brian Slagle, the owner and CEO of Metal Blade Records, is also a Vegas. He is now a full-time Vegas resident and can take us plenty of places. So we'll bounce off one another. We'll make it happen. I can't wait for it to go, man. Like getting, and people in hockey, like the players want this, but people in media want it just as much too. Eh, Scotty? Like True. You haven't been able to see all your friends and compatriots now for way too long on a regular basis.
Yeah. Well, let's make it happen.
Absolutely.
My friend, this has been outstanding. The first edition of The Suitcase and the Scribe, now in the books. Can't wait for next week, and fine work by you. Let's do it again. I wish we could tape the second one right now, but no, we're going to have to wait.
We'll have more hockey topics next time. It'll be even better.